Welcome to Untitled Files. Tonight, we're going to step into a mystery that remained unsolved for more than 3 decades. A story that begins with silence, deep water, and a name no one knew. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the Florida wetlands in the winter of 1971. Not the Florida of neon lights and tourist beaches, but the dark, humid interior, Sumter County. A place where the cypress trees drape with Spanish moss and the black waters of Lake Panasoffkee remain undisturbed for decades. This is the story of the woman found near Lake Panasoffkee. For years, she had no identity. No past, no family to claim her, only fragments, scattered clues, and questions that refused to disappear. On February 19, 1971, 2 hitchhikers were walking across the Interstate 75 bridge. They looked down into the shallow water below and saw something that didn't belong. It wasn't a fallen log or discarded trash. It was the remains of a woman. For over 50 years, she was known only as Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee. She was a ghost in the system, a victim without a name. But after half a century of silence, the cold walls of forensic science finally cracked. Tonight, we unravel the long, heartbreaking journey of a woman who traveled thousands of miles only to end up beneath a bridge, and the 30-year scientific crusade to give her back her name. So, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's slowly unravel this case together. It was a quiet morning in 1971 in Sumter County, Florida. Near a stretch of water known as Lake Panasoffkee, something unusual was discovered. Floating in the canal, partially submerged, was the body of a young woman. When the Sumter County Sheriff's deputies arrived, the scene was grim. The body was partially submerged in the muck. Because of the brackish water and the cool February air, the remains were remarkably well preserved through a process called saponification, where the body's fats turn into a wax-like substance. At first glance, nothing seemed immediately recognizable. There were no identification documents. No personal belongings that could clearly tell investigators who she was or where she came from. But what made the discovery even more unsettling was the condition of the body. The woman had been carefully wrapped, almost deliberately concealed. Her remains suggested that whoever was responsible had taken time to hide her, time to ensure she would not easily be identified. She was young, likely between 17 and 24 years old. She was petite, standing about 5 feet 2 inches tall. She had long reddish-brown hair. She had been wearing a green checkered shirt, green pants, and a thin gold chain around her neck. On her ring finger, she wore a gold ring with a clear stone. Her teeth showed signs of extensive dental work that suggested she may not have been from the United States. Because in the early 1970s, dental procedures varied significantly from country to country. The materials used, the techniques, everything pointed toward the possibility that she had grown up elsewhere, possibly Europe, but without a name. That clue alone led nowhere. But it was the object around her neck that told the true story. A man's size 36 belt. She hadn't drowned. She had been murdered. Someone had stood behind her, looped that leather belt around her throat, and tightened it until the life left her eyes. Then they tossed her over the side of the I-75 bridge, expecting the swamp to swallow the evidence forever. Investigators quickly realized this was no accident. This was a homicide. Investigators checked missing persons reports across the Southeast. They checked dental records. They waited for a frantic parent or a grieving husband to call, but no one came. Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee was alone. Over time, the case became known simply as the Lady of the Lake. Her identity remained a mystery. Sketches were created, reconstructions were attempted. Investigators reached out across states, even across countries, hoping someone, somewhere, would recognize her face, but no one came forward. Days turned into months, months turned into years, and eventually, years turned into decades. As the years turned into decades, the case went cold. The files sat in a dusty drawer at the sheriff's office. As time passed, the world changed. Technology advanced. DNA science emerged and evolved. Cases once thought impossible to solve slowly began to reopen, but for the woman of Lake Panasoffkee, the silence remained. She was buried without a name. A life reduced to a case file. A mystery left to drift in the background of history. However, forensic technology was evolving in ways the 1971 detectives could never have imagined. In the mid-1980s and again in the 2000s, her body was exhumed. Forensic anthropologists, led by the renowned Dr. Heather Walsh Haney, began to read her bones like a map. They found something fascinating. This woman had undergone a very specific orthopedic surgery on her right ankle when she was a child. A Watson-Jones procedure to repair a tendon. This suggested she came from a family with the means to afford specialized medical care in the 1950s or 60s. But the real breakthrough came from isotope analysis. By analyzing the lead and strontium isotopes in her teeth and hair, scientists could determine where she lived at different stages of her life. The results were shocking. She wasn't from Florida. She wasn't even from the South. The isotopes showed that she had spent her childhood in Northern Europe, likely Greece. Then, about a year before her death, she migrated to the United States. Specifically, the data pointed toward the northeastern U.S., likely a Greek-American enclave in a place like Lowell, Massachusetts, or Rhode Island. The mystery was widening. Who was this young Greek woman who had crossed an ocean only to die in a Florida swamp? In the early 2000s, investigators revisited the case. New techniques allowed them to extract DNA from remains that had been preserved for decades. There was hope, quiet, cautious hope, that science might finally succeed where traditional investigation had failed. Still, progress was slow. DNA databases at the time were limited, matches were rare, and without a direct relative in the system, identification remained just out of reach. But some mysteries refused to stay buried. Then came a breakthrough that would change everything: the rise of genetic genealogy. By combining DNA analysis with public ancestry databases, investigators could now do something revolutionary. They could trace family lines, even when no immediate match existed. It was painstaking work. Hours turned into days, days into months. As genealogists built family trees, followed distant connections, and searched for patterns hidden deep within genetic code. And slowly a picture began to form. The unknown woman wasn't just a victim anymore. She was part of a family that somewhere in the world had once known her, had once loved her, and had spent years not knowing what had happened. The case found a second life on the internet. Subreddits like Unresolved Mysteries and Grateful Doe became obsessed with her. Users spent thousands of hours cross-referencing Greek immigration records with missing persons reports in New England. Today, her story continues to circulate online. Communities like Reddit, especially threads dedicated to unresolved mysteries, have brought renewed attention to her case. People from around the world examine the details, discuss theories, and try to piece together what might have happened. Because even after all these years, questions still linger. In 2012, a breakthrough occurred on a different front. A forensic artist created a new 3D reconstruction of her face. This wasn't the haunting, distorted sketch from the 70s. This looked like a real person. The image was shared across social media and even on Greek television shows like Light in the Tunnel, which specializes in finding missing people. Slowly, the world was closing in on her identity. The untitled file of Lake Panasoffkee was about to be titled. Finally, after more than 30 years, the silence broke. In 2021, 50 years to the month after she was found, the Sumter County Sheriff's Office made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the true crime community. Through the use of genetic genealogy, the same technology used to catch the Golden State Killer, they had found a match. They contacted a family in Greece, and through DNA testing, the mystery was finally solved. Her name was Konstantina Diana Bakalis. She was not just the Lady of the Lake. She was a real person, with a past, with a story, and with people who had once searched for answers. Diana was born in 1948 in a small village in Greece. She was a vibrant, beautiful young woman who had moved to the United States in pursuit of the American dream. She had been living in New Jersey and New York just months before she disappeared. Her family had never forgotten her. In their minds, she had simply disappeared into the vastness of America. In an era before cell phones and social media, a daughter moving abroad and losing touch was a tragic, but not unheard of occurrence. They never imagined she had met such a violent end. The woman found near Lake Panasoffkee was identified. Her name was restored to the world, restoring something that had been missing for decades, her identity. We have her name. We have her face. We have her history. But the most important question remains unanswered. Who put the belt around her neck? But even as one mystery was solved, another remained. Who had done this to her, and why? The case transformed. From an unidentified victim to an identified woman. And now, once again, to an unsolved murder. The investigation is now a homicide hunt. Investigators began retracing her steps. They looked into her background, her movements, her possible connections. Police believe Diana was traveling with someone she trusted, or someone she had recently met who offered her a ride south. The fact that a man's belt was used suggests a crime of opportunity or a sudden domestic escalation. Some evidence suggested she may have traveled, possibly hitchhiking, which was more common at the time. Others believed she may have known her killer. There were signs of struggle, indications that her death had not been random. But without witnesses, without clear leads, the trail remained cold. Did she have a secret boyfriend? Was she hitchhiking? Was she a victim of a serial killer operating on the I-75 corridor in the early 70s? The trail is 50 years old, but it is no longer cold. Now that we know who Diana was, investigators can trace her last known contacts in the Greek communities of the Northeast. They are looking for men who would have been in their 20s or 30s in 1971, men who perhaps owned a green Chevy or mentioned a trip to Florida that they never wanted to talk about again. Who was she with in her final days? How did she end up in that canal? And who made the decision to ensure she would never be found? There's something haunting about cases like this, not just because of the crime itself, but because of the time. Decades of silence, decades of not knowing, and then, finally, a name. But a name is only the beginning. Justice is something else entirely. The story of Diana Bacalus is a testament to the fact that no one is truly forgotten as long as someone is looking. It took 30 years for the science to catch up, and another 20 for the DNA to bridge the gap, but Diana is finally going home. She is no longer Little Miss Lake Panasoffkee. She is a daughter, a sister, and a woman whose life was stolen. As you lie there, listening to this story, think about the journey this case has taken. From a quiet lake in Florida to the digital age of DNA and online communities, from complete anonymity to a restored identity, and yet still incomplete. Somewhere out there, the truth exists, perhaps in a memory someone has long tried to forget, perhaps in a detail that once seemed unimportant, or perhaps in a story that has yet to be told, until that truth is uncovered. The Woman of Lake Panasoffkee remains part of a larger mystery, a reminder that even when time passes, even when decades go by, some stories refuse to fade. As you drift off to sleep, or perhaps continue your journey through these files. Remember that every unresolved case is just waiting for the right moment, the right technology, or the right person to speak up. Thank you for listening to Untitled Files. If you found this deep dive intriguing, please consider subscribing for more atmospheric mysteries. If you enjoy slow, immersive mysteries like this, consider following the channel for more stories that unfold in the quiet hours. And as always, stay curious, stay safe, and keep searching for the truth. Good night.